What's up? I'm about to show you 4 slower balls that you can use to deceive any batsman on any pitch with any ball, whether leather or tennis. Every other video that you've seen probably goes something like this. This is the grip, this is the release, and now go and bowl. But the problem is, this does not tell you how to actually deceive the batsman, and it does not teach you how to control the variation. So what ends up happening is either your action's completely different as you're bowling this, or your action stays the same and the ball is landing 2 pitches over. So the next 2 minutes are going to save you countless hours in practice in bowling slower balls. So let's get started. So you have 2 goals when bowling slower balls. The first is to make sure that your action does not change much. So for example, if this is my normal action, when I'm bowling a slower ball, it's not going to be exactly the same, but your arm speed should stay the same. Only thing that should be different is maybe your release, and it does vary from slower ball to slower ball, but as a general rule, don't like open your body up more or do something really different, because then it clues the batsman in from before. We're going to start off with Bumrah's off cutter. So to bowl his off cutter, what you do is you have the exact same grip, that stays the same. The only thing that changes is your release. So at release, you actually break your wrist to the side, and then what happens then is that it creates an off cut on the ball. So it not only slows down but also cuts in. So Bumrah's off cutter, you actually want this to land slightly fuller than good length, just outside off. But you don't want it too full so that it can still beat the batsman on the spot. Now here's what happens. If I was to just bowl a straight ball, it'll land on that spot. But as you can see, as I bowled Bumrah's off cutter with my exact same action, without trying to change anything, you see the ball doesn't land on good length anymore. It actually lands a little bit to the side and it's a little bit shorter. And you'll see this happens over and over as I keep bowling. It might not be in the exact same spot, but it's landing offset to the side by a little bit every time. And the reason for Bumrah's slower ball is that because my wrist is breaking to the side, my hand is pushing the ball that way. So that's why it's going towards the offside. And then because I have 3 fingers on the ball rather than just 2, because when you release it normally there's only usually 2 on it. Because I have 3, the ball is actually slower and it's going to fall closer to me. So here's how you adjust that. Rather than trying to aim for good length while bowling the off cutter, I'm going to pretend I'm just bowling a straight ball, aiming for a Yorker on leg stump. And what happens then is that because the ball is offset to the offside and it's a little bit shorter, the ball will actually end up landing somewhere near good length. So the point is, when you bowl, there will be an offset to some area. Once you figure that out, try and keep your action the exact same, which is our first goal. And then figure out where that offset is, and then try and bowl in a different location according to that offset. So if my off cutter falls shorter into the offside, bowl fuller into the leg side, which is what a Yorker on leg stump would be like. And once you understand this concept, you'll be able to learn any variation you want to even faster. And using that same logic, we're going to move on to our second variation. Our second variation is the classical leg cutter, and here's how you bowl this. So you keep the seam upright, and then you take your index finger and you move it to this side of the ball. And as you release it, you don't even have to change anything. It'll just come out like this. So it'll cut a little bit, as you will see. For the classical leg cutter, you want the ball to bounce at hard length on off stump or maybe even on middle, because based on how much the pitch is cutting, this could really beat the batsman and square him up. Now, one very important trick with this is, rather than holding it like this the entire way when you're running up, you can actually hold it straight, and then as you do your jump, at this point, you can then move your finger here. Because what happens then is, the non-striker will not be able to see that you're holding a leg cutter, and neither will the batsman. Whereas with some deliveries like the knuckleball and all, if you run up holding it like this, the batsman knows something's up. This is what it looks like when you actually bowl it. And the good thing about this variation is that this works very well on pitches that give you assistance, because this comes out at almost the same speed as your normal ball, and it cuts just a little bit. And on top of that, it's very hard for the batsman to actually notice you're doing this. So it's a more subtler variation, which I think I've said before in other videos that subtle variations work better than really big ones that do a lot, because the batsman doesn't even know you're doing them. Now, for the offset part, when I do this, there's 2 things that happen. Number one, because my hand is more on this side of the ball ends up going a little bit to the leg side. And 2, because my fingers are wider, there's more friction between on the ball. So the ball actually lands a little bit closer. So it's kind of opposite to the off cutter, where it actually ends up going this side, but still is a little bit shorter. So when I try and bowl this, rather than trying to aim for good length, I try and bowl it a little bit fuller and maybe a little bit just outside off stump. What you'll notice is this one does not actually move the offset is not too much on that side, just a little bit. So you can get away with just aiming for good length with this because it's still very hard to pick up from the hand. Our third variation is the back of the hand, which is one that was actually very popular a few years back, but I still like this one because even though the batsman can see it, it still has an effect. So the way you bowl the back of the hand is exact same grip. The batsman will not know you're bowling this until after you release it. And then the key is actually in the release, which is where rather than coming over and having your hand like this, you actually have your hand come out the back. And you can actually even flick your wrist backwards. And the reason why this variation is so powerful is because even if the batsman knows this is coming, this ball actually does things off the surface. It kind of acts like a leg cutter, but because if you flick your wrist properly, the ball will actually be spinning forward. And as a spinner, if you add top spin, you get extra bounce. So the good thing about this variation is, it doesn't matter if the batsman knows it's coming or not. It's still hard to play it if it lands in the right spot. And you can see this looks very weird to the batsman, so if they've never seen it, it'll be difficult for them to play. And even if they have seen it, it'll be hard for them to adjust to the extra bounce and the cut. For the back of the hand, you want it to land just fuller than good length, outside off stump, because the ball actually gets extra bounce. So if the batsman goes on the front foot, this will make it very hard for him to hit the ball properly. Now, the offset for this one is a little bit weird because it does depend on how you bowl it. But if you are turning your hand over completely, it'll go pretty much straight. So you don't have to worry about the line. But because it's coming out the top of your hand, it actually ends up being a little bit fuller. So for this one, you have to control and make sure it doesn't go for a waist high no ball. You have to keep it a little bit lower. Our fourth variation is kind of a leather ball special, but if you bowl this with the heavy tennis ball, it has a really different effect and a really unique one, and that is the knuckleball. This is Bhuvneshwar Kumar's favorite variation, or at least it used to be. And it's pretty simple actually. I like to grip it. The thumb is still on the seam, but with the fingers, you have to grab it either with your fingernails or, because I have very small fingernails, with just the tips of your fingers. And you can see this is what it looks like. For the knuckleball, you want to aim for just good length on off stump because you don't know where this will swing. It won't swing too much, but it can really surprise the batsman and yourself. Now, one important thing with this one is, if the batsman sees you holding this the entire way, he's going to be ready. He's going to have no surprises. So what I actually like to do is similar to the leg cut. I actually like to hold it normally, but I like to hold it very loose in the fingers, because what happens then is, as I do this jump, right, I go, at this point I pull it in, and what happens then is, it's in the knuckleball grip, and then from here you can just release it normally. The good thing about this variation is it's very hard to predict what it does. In fact, that's why it's good. Even the bowler can't predict what's going to happen. And if the bowler doesn't know, how is the batsman going to know? You can swing randomly. Once it bounces off the pitch, if it lands on the seam, it'll seam around. And then in tennis ball cricket, what actually happens is the ball kind of stops. Because there's no spin on it, it actually stops a little bit. So it's very hard for the batsman to time this, as long as you don't bowl it too full or too short. Now the offset for this one is similar to the back of the hand. The line stays the same because your wrist is straight and you have equal weight on both sides of the ball. But based on how tightly you're gripping it, it could be either fuller or shorter. So for this one, you need to bowl 3 knuckleballs yourself and see whether it's going fuller or shorter, and then you can adjust the offset based on it. So in conclusion, I've taught you 4 variations. I've taught you how to bowl them, because the most important part is figuring out how to control them and deceive the batsman at the same time, which is what no other videos I've seen on YouTube actually tell you how to do. So if you understand this concept of the offset, this will help you not just in bowling the slow balls I've taught you, but every other slow ball you want to bowl, and just bowling in general. Because if you realize that you're bowling consistently fuller, that means something might be wrong in your action. Or if you're bowling wide, something in your alignment. Now the next part of this series is going to be where I teach you when to bowl slower balls. Because when I'm being honest, you don't really need 5-6 slower balls. You only need one good one, and you need to know when to deliver the killing blow. So I'll see you next week.